At 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, my wife of 10 years sent me an email that changed everything. I was sitting in my Charleston home office reviewing blueprints for the medical center expansion project when the notification popped up. Sophie Brooks. That's what showed in my inbox, not Sophie or Honey like it used to be. Just her full name, like a business contact. The subject line read, "Financial Update." I opened it. 4 sentences that ended my marriage. "Nathan, I've moved the inheritance funds into my personal account. It's better this way. We both know this hasn't been working for months. I'll be in touch through my attorney." Attached was a photo. Blurry, but clear enough. Sophie on a hotel balcony with some guy I'd never seen. Wine glasses, sunset, her arm around his waist. She was smiling the way she used to smile at me, back when we first met. "My name is Nathan Brooks. I'm 45, run a commercial architecture firm here in Charleston, and I just got cleaned out by the woman who promised to love me for better or worse. That inheritance wasn't just money to me. It was $425,000 from my Uncle Richard, my dad's older brother who took me in when my parents died in a car wreck. I was 16 then, angry and lost. Richard was a construction foreman who worked his way up from concrete crew to running major commercial builds. Taught me that anything worth building starts with a solid foundation. When cancer got him last year, he left me everything. One note with the will: build something that lasts, kid. Sophie knew what that money meant. We'd talked about it plenty, how Richard had raised me, put me through college, taught me the construction business before I switched to architecture. She'd nodded and said all the right things about honoring his memory. Now she'd stolen it. Or tried to. I closed the laptop and walked to the kitchen. Poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and looked out at the backyard where we'd built that stone patio together 3 summers ago. I'd done the actual work while she picked out expensive pavers and talked about hosting dinner parties. All those weekends building what I thought was our life together. My phone sat silent on the counter. No missed calls, no follow-up texts, just that email and silence, like she'd already moved on to whatever she'd been planning. The signs had been there for months, maybe longer. Sophie's coaching retreats getting more frequent. 2 days became 4, then week-long trips to places I'd never heard of. CrossFit coaching and nutrition consulting, she called it, building her brand. Her phone started staying face down on tables. Passwords changed overnight. Conversations got shorter, more distracted. When I'd ask about her day, she'd give me one-word answers and change the subject. 3 months ago, she started asking weird questions about Richard's inheritance. Where exactly was the money? Which accounts? Should we consolidate our holdings for better management? I'd told her I'd look into it, but something felt off about the way she kept pushing. I should have trusted that instinct. I reopened the laptop and read her email again. No, dear Nathan, no explanation, just the announcement. Like terminating a business contract. I typed back, "Got it. Thanks for letting me know." Then I closed the laptop and went to bed. Lay there in our king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in months, maybe years, the house felt quiet. Not lonely, quiet. Like I could finally think clearly. Here's what Sophie didn't know. The inheritance had never been where she thought it was. Richard had been smarter than either of us realized. When he got his diagnosis, he'd worked with his attorney to set up an irrevocable trust. The money was protected, locked down tight with security protocols she'd never seen. Her transfer was nothing but a failed attempt that triggered every alarm the system had. I'd been getting alerts for weeks. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. I met Sophie 13 years ago at a building industry conference in Atlanta. She was launching her fitness coaching business, looking for architects to design her first gym space. I was 5 years into my career, hungry for projects that weren't just office buildings and strip malls. She was attractive, ambitious, full of plans for expanding into nutrition consulting and wellness retreats. We clicked immediately. Similar drive, similar goals, both building businesses from the ground up. We married within 3 years. Built what looked like a solid life in Charleston where my firm had its main office. Bought the Craftsman House on Meeting Street with the wraparound porch she'd always wanted. No kids, her choice. My business is my baby, she'd say. I understood. My buildings were mine. For 7 years, things worked. I designed medical centers and office complexes. She built her brand, started traveling for client development. We hosted dinner parties, took vacations, looked successful on paper and in person. Then Richard got sick. Cancer, fast, and brutal. I took partial leave to help care for him in Colombia. Sophie visited twice in 6 months. Hospitals depress me, she explained. I didn't push it. Figured everyone handles grief differently. When Richard died, he left me everything. The money surprised me. I had no idea he'd invested so carefully over the decades. Sophie seemed surprised too, suddenly interested in our financial planning in ways she'd never been. We should put it toward expanding the business, she suggested one night. Her business, she meant. I need to think about what Richard would want, I said. That was the first crack, small but visible. Others followed. Sophie started traveling more for client development meetings. Her calls got shorter, often with voices in the background that went quiet when I asked who she was with. Our neighbor Bill stopped by one afternoon while Sophie was at a team retreat in Sedona, saw someone dropping her off last week. He mentioned, "Late, wasn't it? Thought you were out of town." I had been. 3-day conference in Raleigh. I thanked him and filed it away. Then came the password changes. Banking apps locked when they'd never been before. Financial conversations that ended abruptly when I asked specific questions. 2 weeks before Sophie left for what would be her final retreat, my financial advisor called. Paul Rodriguez had handled our accounts for years through my firm's investment program. "Someone's been trying to access information about your trust accounts," Paul said, "using your personal information but failing the security protocols." "Which accounts?" I asked, though I already knew. "The inheritance funds. They had your social security number but couldn't answer the verification questions about your uncle." I thanked him and sat at my desk for a long time. That evening, Sophie brought up consolidating our accounts again. "It's silly to have so many separate logins," she said, not meeting my eyes. "We should simplify everything." "You're probably right," I said. "I'll talk to Paul about it." The next day, I drove to Columbia and met with Diane Parker, Richard's attorney for 20 years. Explained my concerns without emotion, just facts. "Your uncle was wise to suggest the irrevocable trust structure," Diane said. "The money is protected regardless of what happens in your marriage. And if someone tried to move those funds without authorization, that would be attempted financial fraud. Clear legal consequences." I nodded. "Let's set up monitoring that alerts us to any access attempts." When I got home, Sophie had packed for her retreat. She kissed me briefly, already distant. "I might extend this one," she said. "Really dive deep into the training protocols." I helped load her bags, watched her drive away, then opened our shared cloud storage. In a folder labeled Home Renovation Ideas, a project we'd discussed for next year, I found what I was looking for. Screenshots of my account information, copies of statements, notes about transfer protocols, a photo of a whiteboard with my inheritance amount minus 20%, labeled transfer fee. She'd been planning this for months. I made a list of what I needed to do, called 3 people, started documenting everything. By the time her email arrived 5 days later, I was ready. Here's what I did next. 24 hours after Sophie's email, I made my first call. Paul Rodriguez, my financial advisor, answered on the second ring. "The trust company logged 3 more access attempts yesterday," Paul said without preamble. "All blocked. IP address traces back to Scottsdale, Arizona." "Not Sedona?" I asked. "Definitely Scottsdale." "And Nathan?" "She's not just trying random passwords. Someone coached her on financial protocols." I thanked him and hung up. Made my second call to Diane Parker, Richard's attorney. "I'm forwarding you Sophie's email," I said, "along with the access logs." "Received," Diane said after a pause. "This constitutes admission of attempted fraud. How do you want to proceed? File for divorce. Cite financial misconduct." Diane connected me with Michael Torres, the best divorce attorney in Charleston. His secretary squeezed me in for 3 p.m. By noon, Sophie had texted, "Did you get my email?" I responded, "Yes, that's all you have to say?" Came back minutes later. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove to Michael's office where Diane joined by video. "The attempted transfer creates multiple advantages," Michael explained, reviewing documents Diane had forwarded. "Inherited funds in an irrevocable trust, never commingled with marital assets, clear evidence of unauthorized access attempts." "What's my timeline?" I asked. "File immediately. South Carolina allows fault-based divorce when fraud is involved." I signed papers before leaving his office. At 4:30, my phone rang. Sophie's name on the screen. "You're overreacting," she said. "No greeting. This doesn't have to be complicated." "I agree," I said. "Then let's handle this like adults." The money's already moved. Fighting it just means more legal fees. Where are you staying? I asked. She paused. What does that matter? Just curious where home is now. Nathan, focus. I'm having my lawyer draw up settlement papers. Stephen Murphy's already reviewing everything. I wrote down the name. Thanks for the heads up. Are you listening? This can be clean and simple. You said that already. I kept my voice level. I appreciate you wanting to keep it simple. Another pause. What are you planning? Nothing yet. Still processing. I could hear her relax, reading my calm as acceptance. It's better this way, she said. We've been drifting apart for years. This saves us both time and money. You're probably right. After hanging up, I called Michael with Stephen Murphy's information. Then I sent Sophie one text. Taking time to process. We'll be in touch. Her response, don't wait too long. Papers ready by Friday. Friday, 3 days away. That evening, Diane called with updates. Trust company completed their investigation. Multiple unauthorized attempts over 3 months, all documented with IP addresses and timestamps. They're referring it to their legal department for potential criminal charges. Criminal charges? Financial fraud, attempted theft of trust assets. The paper trail is extensive. I forwarded everything to Michael, made myself dinner and sat in my quiet house, planning my next moves. The next morning, Stephen Murphy called. His tone was cautious. Mr. Brooks, I represent your wife in this separation. She indicates you're amenable to a straightforward settlement. Is that what she told you? She mentioned you understood the financial situation. Which situation specifically? A pause. Division of assets, including recent inheritance funds. Has she shown you documentation of these transfers? She provided statements from 3 months ago, he said carefully. And current transfer confirmations, those are forthcoming from the bank. See? Has she mentioned the inheritance structure, the irrevocable trust, the legal impossibility of what she's claiming? Silence. Mr. Murphy, I suggest you verify her information before proceeding. My attorney will send documentation today. After hanging up, I drove to Heritage Trust Bank where Sophie and I had maintained our joint accounts for 8 years. Harold, the branch manager, had handled our mortgage refinancing. I need to review recent activity on all joint accounts, I explained. Harold pulled up our information. His expression shifted as he scrolled. Significant withdrawals over the past 6 months, he said, turning the monitor toward me. I saw regular transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Started small, $2,500, $3,200, then escalating. 2 weeks ago, $18,500. Total, $87,000. This receiving account, I asked, is it with Heritage Trust? External. Coastal States Credit Union in Arizona. I'd never heard of it. Can you print the complete transaction history? While waiting, I got a text from Michael, Murphy requesting urgent meeting. Very different tone. The Coastal States account had been opened 8 months ago. Address listed, Scottsdale Apartment Complex. Account holder, Sophie Brooks. Individual account. She's been building a new life for months, I told Michael when I reached his office, while systematically draining your joint assets, he added. We were reviewing bank records when his assistant announced Stephen Murphy on the line. I've received the trust documentation, Murphy said, voice tight. My client may have misrepresented the financial situation, including her ability to access those funds, Michael asked. Correct. Given this information, we should discuss a revised approach. My client filed for divorce citing financial misconduct, Michael replied. The documentation speaks for itself. After the call, Michael looked at me. He'll withdraw by end of day. No attorney wants this level of exposure. What about the money she actually took from our joint accounts? We'll document everything. Let her explain to a judge why she opened a secret residence and drained marital assets systematically. That afternoon, I had one more task. I needed to know who he was, not for confrontation, just to understand the complete picture of what I'd missed while building what I thought was a marriage. My golf buddy Andy Sullivan runs a private investigation business. One phone call, one photo from Sophie's email, and by evening, I had answers. Alex Winters, personal trainer at an upscale Scottsdale gym, former financial advisor who left the investment sector 3 years ago. LinkedIn said he was pursuing authentic wellness connections. His BMW was registered to the same apartment complex as Sophie's new bank account. That evening, my doorbell rang. Courier with an envelope. Inside, Stephen Murphy's formal withdrawal letter, copies sent to Sophie and the court. Attached note from Michael, Domino 1. My phone lit up, Sophie calling, I let it ring. She called 4 more times, then texted, "What did you do?" I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a beer and sat on my back porch, looking at the patio we'd built together. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more threats, more attempts to make me the villain in her story. But I had documentation for everything now. Bank records, access logs, legal filings, even the identity of her accomplice. Sophie thought she'd been playing chess while I played checkers. She was about to learn otherwise. The next morning brought chaos. Sophie called at 6:47 a.m. I was making coffee when her name lit up my phone. "You sabotaged me," she said. No greeting, just accusation. "Stephen Murphy dropped me because of whatever lies you told him." I didn't tell him anything, I said. I sent him documentation. What documentation? Trust records, bank statements, access logs showing your failed attempts to steal $425,000. Silence. Then, I wasn't stealing. That money belongs to both of us. Actually, it doesn't. Richard left it to me specifically, in an irrevocable trust that protects it from exactly what you tried to do. You're being vindictive. I'm being factual. You opened a secret bank account, drained $87,000 from our joint accounts, and tried to steal my inheritance. Those are facts. Another silence. We need to talk face to face. Through your attorney when you get a new one. Nathan, be reasonable. I made a mistake with that email. I was angry and said things I didn't mean. The bank records go back 8 months, Sophie. The apartment lease in Scottsdale is 8 months old. This wasn't anger. This was planning. I hung up and called Michael Torres. She's panicking, I told him, looking for a new attorney. She'll find one, but they'll see the same evidence Murphy saw. Her position is legally indefensible. What's our timeline? Emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday. She filed a motion claiming financial misconduct on your part. Wants the court to freeze all assets pending investigation. I laughed. She's claiming I committed financial misconduct? Classic deflection strategy. Attack before defending. Won't work, but it buys time. That afternoon, Michael called back. Sophie hired Alan Foster. He's expensive but smart. Requested immediate settlement discussions. Alan Foster had a reputation for aggressive divorce litigation. If he was asking for settlement talks, he'd seen enough evidence to know Sophie's position was hopeless. What's he offering? I asked. Clean split. She keeps what she took from joint accounts, makes no claims on the inheritance or house. You keep everything else. Counteroffer, I said. She returns half of what she took, $43,500, and signs a non-disclosure agreement. I don't pursue fraud charges. Michael paused. You could push for more. I don't want more. I want this finished. While Michael negotiated, I had one final task. Our neighbor Bill had agreed to provide a witness statement about Alex Winters visiting my house while I was traveling. I drove over to get his signature notarized. That guy was here regularly, Bill confirmed as we sat in his kitchen. Usually evenings, sometimes stayed overnight. Gray BMW parked right in your driveway like he owned the place. How many times would you estimate? 6, maybe 7 times over the past few months. Always when you were out of town. I thought maybe you knew. I thanked him and drove to the bank to have his statement notarized. Added it to the evidence file that was growing thicker by the day. That evening, Michael called with an update. Foster reviewed everything. Bank records, access logs, neighbor's statement, trust documentation. He's recommending Sophie accept your terms. When do we meet? Tomorrow morning. Courthouse conference room. Foster wants this settled before it goes public. I spent that night in my house, our house, looking at 10 years of accumulated possessions, wedding photos on the mantle, vacation souvenirs from trips we'd taken together, the expensive kitchen appliances Sophie had insisted we needed for entertaining. None of it felt like mine anymore, not because she was taking it, but because it had all been built on something that wasn't real. The next morning, I met Michael at the courthouse. Foster was already there with Sophie, both looking like they'd had a long night. Sophie had aged in the weeks since I'd seen her. Her face was drawn, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked like fear. She glanced at me once when I entered the room, then looked away. My client accepts the proposed terms. Foster said without preamble. She'll transfer $43,500 within 24 hours. No claims against inheritance or other assets. Non-disclosure agreement as specified. Michael slid the settlement papers across the table. Sophie signed without reading them, her hand shaking slightly. I signed my portion, then slid an envelope toward her. "What's this?" she asked, the first words she'd spoken. "House keys, alarm codes, cloud storage passwords, everything you need to get whatever you left behind." She opened the envelope, looked inside, then back at me. It was never supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? She didn't answer. Foster guided her to stand, and they left without another word. I sat in the conference room for several minutes after they'd gone, paperwork scattered across the table, officially divorced after 10 years of marriage. "How do you feel?" Michael asked. "Relieved," I said, and realized I meant it. For the first time in months, I could see clearly. The foundation had been cracked for years. Sophie's betrayal hadn't destroyed our marriage. It had simply revealed what was already broken. Now I could start building something real. 6 months later, I sold the house on Meeting Street. Too many empty rooms, too many memories built on false foundations. The new owners, a young family with twin daughters, loved the wraparound porch and the stone patio I'd built with my own hands. "You did beautiful work," the husband said during the final walkthrough. "This will be perfect for our girls to grow up in." I moved to a downtown loft, walking distance from my firm's office. Bought less furniture, kept fewer things. Turned out, I didn't need most of what Sophie and I had accumulated over 10 years. The medical center expansion project broke ground in March. 15 stories of healing space designed to last generations. My name would be on a small plaque by the entrance, but the real legacy would be in the foundation, invisible, unshakable, built to support whatever came after. Richard would have been proud. With Diane Parker's help, I restructured the inheritance into the Richard Brooks Foundation, supporting construction apprenticeships for kids who'd lost parents. Our first recipient was a 17-year-old from rural South Carolina, whose essay about rebuilding homes after Hurricane Florence caught the selection committee's attention. "Your uncle would have loved this kid," Diane said when we awarded the apprenticeship. Same work ethic, same drive to build something meaningful. The foundation gave Richard's money purpose beyond just sitting in accounts. It was building futures, one apprentice at a time. One Tuesday afternoon, collecting mail in my building's lobby, I found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for exactly $43,500 and a brief note. The rest of what I owed. No signature, none needed. That evening, I walked down to the Cooper River where Sophie and I had once talked about opening a joint venture. A wellness center I would design, she would operate. A dream that had died long before our marriage had. I sat on a bench watching cargo ships pass, the check still in my pocket. Tomorrow, I would deposit it into the foundation account. Another apprenticeship, another chance to build something that might last. My phone buzzed with a text from Andy Sullivan, my golf buddy, who'd helped investigate Alex Winters. "Dinner still on for 7? Bringing that contractor I mentioned, thinks you might hit it off." I glanced at my watch. Just enough time to walk home, change clothes, and head to the restaurant. Just enough time to decide to say yes to whatever came next. I texted back, "See you at 7. Walking back toward downtown, I thought about foundations again. Richard had taught me that the strongest ones are built to withstand storms you can't predict. They're invisible when everything's going well, but they're what keep structures standing when everything else fails. My marriage to Sophie had been built on something that looked solid but wasn't. Pretty surface, rotten underneath. When pressure came, it collapsed. The foundation I was building now, the business, the apprenticeship program, the relationships with people like Andy and Diane and Michael, these were different, built on truth instead of assumption, tested by adversity instead of just time. At the restaurant, Andy introduced me to Sarah Wilson, a general contractor who specialized in historic renovations. She was funny, direct, talked about her work with the same passion I felt for mine. When she mentioned a project restoring a 19th century church that needed architectural consultation, I found myself interested. "I'd like to see the plans," I said. "I'll email them tomorrow," she replied. Fair warning, it's a challenging project. Previous contractor cut corners, left structural issues. "I like fixing things that are broken," I said. She smiled. "Good. So do I." Walking home after dinner, I realized something had shifted. For months after Sophie's betrayal, I'd been focused on documenting damage, protecting assets, building walls. Important work, but defensive. Now I was thinking about building again. New projects, new partnerships, new possibilities. Sometimes the strongest response to betrayal isn't revenge, it's rebuilding. Taking what you learned from the collapse and using it to construct something better on stronger ground. The Cooper River flowed beside me toward the ocean, carrying away what needed to go, leaving behind what mattered. Uncle Richard's lesson finally understood. Build something that lasts. I was ready to start.